What if you had invested just $1,000 in a tiny startup called UberCab back in 2009? At the time, it was nothing more than a black car service operating only in San Francisco. Your $1,000 would have bought you 0.2% equity in a company valued at just $500,000. Most people would have called you crazy for betting on such a risky idea. But then something unexpected happened. Series A funding hit, and suddenly your stake was worth $15,000. Series B made it $180,000. When Uber went international, your investment jumped to $2.1 million. By the time Uber went public in 2019, your original $1,000 bet had transformed into $8.7 million. Early employees who bought small amounts of company stock became instant multimillionaires. Uber didn't just create wealth, it birthed an entire investment category called ride-sharing. Today, similar ground floor opportunities exist in emerging sectors like artificial intelligence and renewable energy. Sometimes the biggest fortunes start with the smallest bets. Here are 5 things you didn't know about the biggest funding mistakes in startup history. First, every major VC firm rejected Dropbox, calling cloud storage not a real business. After 300 rejections, they finally raised $1.2 million from small angel investors who saw the vision. Second, Y Combinator invested just $15,000 in Dropbox during their early days. That tiny investment became worth $250 million when the company went public. Third, the same VCs who rejected Dropbox later paid 100 times higher prices in later funding rounds. Fourth, this pattern repeated with Airbnb, WhatsApp, and Pandora. All were rejected by major firms, then became billion-dollar companies. Fifth, angel investor Naval Ravikant made $30 million from a $25,000 Dropbox investment. That's a 1,200 times return in just a few years. The crazy part? These opportunities still exist today through equity crowdfunding platforms. While big VCs miss the next unicorn, smart retail investors are getting in early. Did you know a janitor's $100,000 bet turned into over $1 billion? In 1995, David Cheriton was mopping floors at Stanford Computer Labs every night. During the day, he studied computer science, barely scraping by on janitor wages. While cleaning late one evening, he noticed 2 PhD students always working past midnight. Larry Page and Sergey Brin were obsessing over search algorithms, completely broke, but brilliant. Cheriton watched them for months, slowly understanding their vision. In 1998, he made the craziest decision of his life. He wrote them a personal check for $100,000, his entire life savings from years of cleaning and teaching. Google struggled for years, burning through cash with no clear business model. Cheriton went deeper into debt, wondering if he'd thrown away his future. Then came 2004. Google went public. His $100,000 investment became worth $1.65 billion overnight. The former janitor became Stanford's richest professor, proving anyone can build wealth with the right opportunity. Did you know the founder of FedEx saved his company by gambling away their last $5,000? In 1973, Fred Smith was 3 days from complete bankruptcy. FedEx had exactly $5,000 left in the bank, and payroll was about to bounce. Smith had spent weeks begging investors for money, but every door slammed shut. His employees would be out of work. His dream would die. That's when he made the most shocking decision in business history. He flew to Las Vegas with the company's last $5,000. All night long, he sat at the blackjack table, betting everything. By morning, he had won $27,000. When the board discovered his gambling, they were furious. But that extra week of operating money changed everything. It gave Smith just enough time to secure an $11 million funding round. Today, FedEx is worth over $50 billion. Sometimes the biggest risks lead to the greatest rewards. Did you know 2 pizzas once cost someone over $800 million? On May 22, 2010, programmer Laszlo Hanyecz made history with the hungriest decision ever. He desperately wanted pizza but had a problem. He only owned Bitcoin, a weird digital currency nobody understood. So he posted on a forum, literally begging someone to accept his 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 Papa John's pizzas. Finally, someone agreed. The pizzas cost $25. It became the first real-world Bitcoin transaction ever recorded. At Bitcoin's peak, those same 10,000 coins were worth over $800 million. That's roughly $400 million per pizza slice. But here's the thing, without Han Yech's sacrifice, Bitcoin might have remained worthless forever. His transaction proved digital currency could work in the real world. Today, Bitcoin Pizza Day is celebrated every May 22nd by crypto enthusiasts worldwide. One hungry programmer accidentally created the foundation for the entire cryptocurrency market. Sometimes the most expensive mistakes change everything. What if you had invested just $1,000 in Microsoft's IPO on March 13th, 1986? At $21 per share, you would have bought 47 shares of an unknown software company. Most people would have forgotten about this small investment completely. But over the decades, something extraordinary happened. 9 stock splits turned your 47 shares into 6,016 shares. When Windows 95 launched, your stake was suddenly worth $50,000. The internet boom pushed it to $400,000. The cloud computing revolution made it worth $1.2 million. Today, those shares pay you $24,000 in dividends every single year. Your original $1,000 investment now generates more than most people's salaries. Early Microsoft employees who put small amounts into employee stock purchase plans became multimillionaires. They understood something crucial about technology investing. The same opportunities exist today in emerging sectors like artificial intelligence and renewable energy. Patient investors who recognize these patterns can still build generational wealth. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Nike's insane wealth creation story. First, Nike's founders made only $8,000 their entire first year selling Japanese running shoes from their car trunk at track meets. Second, Phil Knight borrowed just $50 from his father to start importing shoes, operating from a garage while keeping day jobs to survive. Third, that iconic swoosh logo that's now worth billions, it cost them only $35 from a design student at Portland State University. Fourth, their first major athlete endorsement wasn't a superstar. It was just a college track coach who believed in their vision. Fifth, they nearly went bankrupt 3 times before going public. But here's the mind-blowing part. When Nike finally went public in 1980, company secretaries became millionaires overnight from their stock options. Early employees who stuck around saw their shares become worth tens of millions of dollars. This proves that joining the right startup early can create generational wealth, even outside the tech industry. Did you know a 21-year-old college dropout turned $12.7 million into $9.4 billion for one venture capital firm? In 2005, Mark Zuckerberg walked into Accel Partners' office with nothing but a laptop and a social network limited to college students. Most venture capitalists saw Facebook as just another MySpace copycat and passed immediately. But partner Jim Breyer noticed something different in the user engagement data. Students were spending hours on the platform daily, checking it obsessively between classes. While competitors focused on flashy features, Facebook had real addiction-level engagement. Breyer wrote a check for $12.7 million, buying 11% of the company. Facebook rapidly expanded to high schools, then corporations, growing faster than anyone predicted. By the 2012 IPO, Accel's stake was worth $9.4 billion. That's a 74,000% return in 7 years. This single investment created the template for social media investing and proved that life-changing venture opportunities still exist for those who recognize true user engagement. Did you know over 1,000 Amazon warehouse workers became millionaires by accident? Back in the 1990s, Amazon was just another startup desperately trying to attract talent. They couldn't compete with big tech salaries, so they offered something unusual. Stock options to everyone, even hourly warehouse packers. Employees hired before 1997 received options worth just pennies per share. Most workers barely understood what they meant. Some almost sold their options for beer money during tough times. But those who held on witnessed something incredible. Amazon's stock price exploded from $18 at IPO to over $3,000 at its peak. Suddenly, warehouse workers who packed books were sitting on millions. One packer who nearly sold his shares for a few $100s retired with $8 million. While other companies hoarded equity, Amazon shared it with everyone. This created over 1,000 millionaire employees who stumbled into wealth. The lesson is clear. Equity compensation in growing companies can change your life forever. Always negotiate for stock options. You never know which startup becomes the next Amazon. Did you know that bonds paying zero interest created more retirement wealth than traditional savings accounts? These mysterious investments, called zero-coupon bonds, became the secret weapon of smart retirement planners. Here's how they worked their magic. You could buy a 30-year Treasury bond for just $174 that would become worth $1,000 at maturity. That's 5.8% annually with zero reinvestment risk. No quarterly checks, no monthly deposits, just pure compound interest working in silence. Retirement planners called them strip bonds, and they guaranteed specific future values decades in advance. The smartest investors would ladder multiple zeros, creating systematic income streams without interest rate risk. When inflation-protected versions appeared during high inflation periods, they became even more powerful. These bonds proved that compound interest doesn't need complexity to build wealth, just patience and the wisdom to buy during high interest rate environments. Sometimes the most boring investments create the most extraordinary fortunes. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Swiss private banking that will blow your mind. First, Swiss banks manage over $2 trillion in offshore wealth, equivalent to India's entire GDP, completely hidden from global tax authorities. Second, Credit Suisse and UBS employ more private bankers than Switzerland has police officers, with minimum account balances starting at $1 million and some requiring $25 million just to open. Third, Swiss banking secrecy laws make it a federal crime for bankers to reveal client information, even after death. Breaking this silence can land you in prison. Fourth, while regular investors struggle with fees, ultra-wealthy clients pay only 0.25% management fees, while earning 8% annual returns through exclusive investment opportunities. Fifth, these banks offer services like storing physical gold in underground mountain vaults and creating complex trust structures across multiple countries. But here's the most shocking part. Swiss private banks generate higher returns than most hedge funds because they have access to pre-IPO investments and private equity deals. Wealth concentration creates exponentially better opportunities for those who can afford private banking services. Did you know one man created America's first mass middle class with a single decision that shocked the world? In 1914, Henry Ford's Detroit factory workers earned $2.50 a day, barely enough to survive. They built cars they could never afford, living paycheck to paycheck in cramped tenements. Ford's board of directors thought he'd lost his mind when he announced his plan. Double every worker's wage to $5 a day, effective immediately. Overnight, men who once scraped by suddenly had real purchasing power. For the first time, they could buy the very cars they assembled. Other manufacturers panicked as workers fled to Ford, forcing them to raise wages too. The ripple effect transformed Detroit into a booming economy. But here's the incredible part. Within one generation, over 10,000 Ford worker families became millionaires through disciplined investing and home ownership. Ford proved a revolutionary truth. When you pay people well, they become customers who drive prosperity for everyone. He didn't just build cars, he built the foundation of modern wealth through employment. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Andrew Carnegie's wealth creation system that made more millionaires per capita than Silicon Valley. First, Carnegie promoted workers based purely on merit, not connections or background. A poor immigrant could become a plant manager within years. Second, he gave profit-sharing bonuses that made ordinary steel workers wealthy. Some earned more in bonuses than their annual salaries. Third, Carnegie personally taught every employee financial literacy and investment principles. He held weekly classes on building wealth. Fourth, he created the first corporate pension system in America, guaranteeing retirement security when most workers died poor. Fifth, Carnegie mentored his workers on real estate and stock investments, sharing his own strategies. His gospel of wealth philosophy wasn't about charity. It was about creating systematic wealth building for everyone. The result? Over 40 of Carnegie's lieutenants became multimillionaires through his mentorship system. This proves that working for leaders who prioritize employee wealth creation can transform ordinary workers into financial elites. Did you know one man created America's first mass middle class with a single decision that shocked the world? In 1914, Henry Ford's Detroit factory workers earned $2.50 a day, barely enough to survive. They built cars they could never afford, living paycheck to paycheck in cramped tenements. Ford's board of directors thought he'd lost his mind when he announced his plan. Double every worker's wage to $5 a day, effective immediately. Overnight, men who once scraped by suddenly had real purchasing power. For the first time, they could buy the very cars they assembled. Other manufacturers panicked as workers fled to Ford, forcing them to raise wages too. The ripple effect transformed Detroit into a booming economy. But here's the incredible part. Within one generation, over 10,000 Ford worker families became millionaires through disciplined investing and home ownership. Ford proved a revolutionary truth. When you pay people well, they become customers who drive prosperity for everyone. He didn't just build cars, he built the foundation of modern wealth through employment. Did you know that one laughed-off meeting cost a company $5 billion and changed entertainment forever? In the year 2000, Netflix co-founder Reed Hastings walked into Blockbuster's headquarters with a $50 million offer. He wanted to sell his struggling startup to the video rental giant. Blockbuster was worth $5 billion at the time, while Netflix was bleeding money with only 300,000 subscribers. CEO John Antioco and his executives literally laughed Hastings out of the room. They called Netflix's mail order model a niche business that would never threaten their empire. Why would they care? Blockbuster was making $800 million annually just from late fees alone. Fast forward 10 years, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy, while Netflix soared to a $240 billion market cap. The executives who mocked streaming technology missed the biggest acquisition opportunity in business history. This proves why smart investors focus on companies solving real consumer problems, not protecting outdated business models. Sometimes the best investments are the ones everyone else is laughing at. What if you could turn $50,000 in savings into a multi-million-dollar real estate empire in just 3 years? Meet someone who started flipping houses on weekends with David Allen Capital funding. First, they secured an additional $200,000, bought their first distressed property, and learned renovation costs the hard way. But here's where it gets interesting. Within months, they were flipping 2 to 3 houses simultaneously, building relationships with wholesalers and real estate agents. They developed systems for property analysis and project management that most people never think about. The ripple effects were unexpected. What started as weekend house flips became a full real estate investment company with hired staff. They began franchising their renovation model across multiple markets. The truth is, many successful real estate empires started exactly like this. Proper funding and business systems transformed simple house flips into generational wealth. Smart finance isn't about getting rich quick, it's about building systems that work while you sleep. Did you know that in 2008, Zimbabwe created trillionaires who couldn't afford bread? During Zimbabwe's economic collapse, inflation reached 231 million% annually. Prices literally doubled every single day. Citizens needed wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. The government printed $100 trillion bills that became worthless overnight. These bills are now sold as novelty items on eBay for more than they were ever worth. Here's the shocking part about wealth inequality. Some Zimbabweans who owned gold or foreign assets became relatively wealthy while their neighbors lost everything. A farmer with US dollars in his pocket could buy entire properties from people holding local currency. This crisis taught the world a crucial lesson about monetary policy. Many Zimbabweans became early Bitcoin adopters, desperately seeking alternatives to their collapsing currency. They understood something most people didn't: the importance of storing wealth outside traditional banking systems. Sometimes the greatest financial education comes from watching money become worthless paper. What if you could relocate your entire business to Estonia and unlock the European Union's digital economy in just 15 minutes? Picture this. You become an Estonian e-resident, gaining a digital identity that opens doors across 27 countries. Within minutes, you're running an EU company online, accessing 99% of government services digitally. Your corporate tax drops to just 20% on distributed profits, while you open European bank accounts remotely. But here's where it gets interesting. You now have instant access to 450 million European customers without additional paperwork. SEPA payments flow directly into your accounts, EU startup grants become available, and you can hire talent from anywhere in Europe. Your entire business runs on secure digital signatures and blockchain record keeping, while government APIs automate your compliance automatically. Over 100,000 entrepreneurs have already made this move, building empires from anywhere in the world. Estonia's digital infrastructure doesn't just reduce costs, it eliminates the geographic barriers that once limited ambitious entrepreneurs. True financial freedom starts with choosing the right foundation. Did you know 2 teenagers from rural Ireland built a $95 billion empire with just 7 lines of code? In 2007, Patrick and John Collison were frustrated teenage programmers coding in their family home. They wanted to sell something online, but accepting payments was a nightmare. Months of paperwork, complex integrations, endless technical headaches. So they decided to fix it themselves. By 2010, when Patrick was just 19 and John 22, they created Stripe. Their breakthrough was simple. 7 lines of code could replace entire payment systems. While secretly signing clients like Shopify and Lyft, they battled giants like PayPal and Square. Peter Thiel and Elon Musk believed in them, investing $2 million to bring them to Silicon Valley. The world didn't notice until it was too late. In 2021, Stripe hit a $95 billion valuation. The Collison brothers became worth $11 billion each, creating over 1,000 millionaire employees. They proved that solving basic business problems can generate extraordinary wealth. Did you know that Unilever made more money from buying back their own shares than from actually selling soap and ice cream? Since 2010, this boring consumer goods company has returned over $50 billion to shareholders through share buybacks. Here's the genius part. When a company buys back its own shares, it destroys them forever. This automatically increases every remaining shareholder's ownership percentage without them buying a single additional share. Imagine owning 1% of a company, then suddenly owning 2% without spending any extra money. That's exactly what happened to Unilever's long-term shareholders over the past decade. While everyone focused on their brands like Ben and Jerry's and Dove, the real wealth creation happened behind the scenes. The company used its massive cash flow to systematically reduce the number of shares in circulation. This financial engineering created more shareholder value than their actual business growth. Patient investors who recognized Unilever's shareholder-friendly management doubled their ownership stakes simply by holding on. Sometimes the most profitable strategy is letting smart companies buy back their own stock. Here are 5 things you didn't know about the most profitable hedge fund in history.